I gotta say, I hate this chair for what it represents, but boy, it's more versatile than my scooter. That's for sure. I could get around more. Getting experimental. Life changes, and sometimes in ways that are really surprising. Most of you here now won't know this, but 15 years ago, in my PM life, that's my pre-Marie life, I had it could only be called a yacht. I had a 30-foot cabin cruiser. Some of you might remember that. It was a liveaboard, like you could live on it for a week. It had a fridge, freezer, stove, microwave. It was really a cool boat. And I love the water. I love being out on the water. And the problem was, it was a bit big to handle by myself. So whenever I had the opportunity to invite somebody on the boat to, I did, because if I was alone, then they could help tie and untie and stuff. I didn't want to wreck $100,000 worth of fiberglass. Anyway, this one particular time, I had received a phone call from a former youth group member. I hadn't seen her in, I guess, must have been almost 10 years. 10 years. And she called up and said, could she come and talk to me? And of course, I thought this was a wonderful opportunity to get on my boat. And so I said yes. And she came down, we got on the boat, and left Beaconsfield Yacht Club and went off to St. Anne's, docked at St. Anne's. We were going to have lunch. And so we sat down on the boat. It was a lovely day, and I said, what's on your mind? She says, I've got something to tell you. I went, okay. And when a former member of a youth group says something like that to you, there are about 4 possibilities. And the top possibility is the one she said. She said, I just wanted you to know I'm pregnant, and I haven't inferred this yet, but there was no guy in her life. This is just, it had happened. And we talked a bit, and she was typical. I hate to say that about anyone, because nobody's typical, everybody's unique, but she was typical in the way she was presenting. But when she got to that line, I don't know how this happened, when people say that, they're not asking me to say, well, let me give you a lesson in biology. That's not what it's about. It's I don't know how this happened. It has a different meaning. And I said something to her. I could only get away with it because of the relationship we had had. I'm about to sneeze, I think. Excuse me. I don't have a cold, but I've been sneezing today. I could only get away with saying it because of the relationship we had, and it was this. I said to her, you're pregnant because you want to be pregnant. Because she had been sexually active for a number of years. And if this had been an accident, it's an accident that would have happened a long time ago. I said, you're pregnant because you want to be pregnant. And she gave me a look that was typical to her, and I'd seen that look before, and I knew exactly what it was. It was that, damn you, you're right. And I said, okay, that being what it is, you got to be honest with yourself. And what are you going to do? What do you plan on doing? And so we talked a while. Abortion was not on her radar. In a lot of ways, it was obvious, and in ways that I couldn't have the length of time necessary to tell you all about it, but in ways that was obvious. There were things in her past that she was working out this way. Okay? And she's going to bring the child to term, and do the best she could. And so we spoke for a while longer, and we had lunch together. And I have no idea how she remembers that conversation. I know that now, that child, who is her spitting image, is 25 years old, and apparently is living a, solid, life, doing quite well, and Mom seems to be as well. But after I dropped her off, I went to the middle of Lake St. Louis in my boat by myself. I really did. Dropped the anchor. Middle of St. Louis is a sandbar from when they did the Seaway. That's the word I was missing. It's also part of the sermon. The Seaway. And it's only about 4 feet deep, and the water is like really, really clear. And I used to love being there because you know what would happen? If you sat your boat there long enough, lots of fish would come under your boat because the boat would be a shadow, and they could hide and then pounce on other. I used to love to watch that. I used to just love watching the ripples. You know, I used to love watching the seaweed, the grass. You know, just waving. I used to love it when the birds would come and hover over my boat, thinking that maybe I was going to throw something. You know, like apparently people often threw leftover food overboard. And occasionally swallows, believe it or not. I'd have my hatch open. I had 2 hatches. I'd have a hatch open. Swallow would fly in one hatch and out the other one. It was just amazing. I used to love doing that. And on this particular day, sitting there, about as relaxed and peaceful an environment as you could possibly think of, or at least for me. I know some people don't like water, but at least for me, that's almost as close to heaven as you can get on earth, as far as I'm concerned. And thinking of this person that I just had lunch with and how forever changed her life was, and I had no idea that how things would work out for her or the child or anything. I was talking to God, as often do, and the word is prayer in the formal religious language, but for me, prayer is just you just talk. It's friends talking to friends, and I was talking to God, and one of the things I said that day was, God, I wish I was rich enough to be able to do all the ministry stuff without having to do the stuff that earns me the salary to pay for it. And I don't know if I said that as clearly as I wanted to. But what I meant was, when I was ordained, I wasn't ordained for roofs and furnaces and buildings and arguments and, trying to convince people that it's okay to sing How Great Thou Art in church. There were some really rough things going on at St. Mary's at that point with people. There were people leaving because I was the worst minister that ever happened to God's creation. There were people coming because I was the best, so I realized that had nothing to do with me. God, there were a lot of arguments about just absolutely stupid things with no eternal significance. And most of my life was dealing with the structure and trying to make the church work, or at least work as best as possible. And any minister that you talk to, if you get them honest enough or give them good enough quality wine, they'll tell you that it's often like that. And the ministry can get lost. It can really get lost. And so there I was. I'd been at this place a couple of years, and there were some wonderful things happening. But one of the cliches that I would use at the time was a cliche for me. Well, you work 50 hours a week just to keep the place running, and any time after that is when you get to do ministry. And how wrong that was. How wrong that was. Because the ministry potential is so incredible, so extraordinary, and so available, so possible. And I was sitting there, I was grieving, and I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't have used that word then, but I was grieving being the rector of a parish. And I was grieving not being a curate anymore at St. George's St. Anne de Bellevue, where pretty much all I had to do was ministry because there was a rector doing all the other garbage. I was grieving that because of this person, then in her early 20s, who I'd had a chance to meet with and talk with. And I had been very significant in her life and the lives of others. And I was just regretting it. Now, why am I saying all of this? There's a couple of reasons. One is because as I prepare to step back as the incumbent of this place, and somebody is going to be paying my salary, the insurance company. It's not a salary, it's not what you get being a minister, but it's not bad, you can live on it, as long as it's supplemented. I'm going to get my wish. Isn't that something? I wish it didn't come at this price, but I'm going to get my wish. I'm going to be able to do whatever ministry I want to do and I'm capable of doing. And that's incredible. That's an incredible possibility. And so, even though now there's a different type of grief, and it would be ridiculous to say anything else. And the idea of being a Christian with a plastic smile on my face, I'm not that type of Christian. But I really do see God working very powerfully in what's going on in my life, our life, the parish life, and in the church as well. See, another thing used to happen when I would sit in Lake St. Louis. This connects with more global ministry, not just me. I would watch the big freighters go by on the seaway, you know? And around that time, you know, everybody was complaining about the Parti Québécois and referendums and how that had destroyed the church and all the rest of it. And I wondered if it was all the Parti Québécois' fault, why were churches all over the country in such a terrible state of decline like we were? I didn't believe, and I don't believe, it was the Parti Québécois and referendums and all the rest of it that caused the decline of the churches or the decline of the English population. I think it was the St. Lawrence Seaway. Because when the St. Lawrence Seaway went through, that meant Montreal could be a transshipment hub. You didn't need to stop at Montreal anymore. Montreal could be bypassed. And Pierre Trudeau the Elder, you know, like the Trudeau the Elder, he knew that, he saw that. And that's why Mirabel Airport was built. Because Mirabel was supposed to keep a lot of it here. And we all know what happened, right? Nothing. Biggest white elephant since the biggest white elephant. So I think that the Parti Québécois and the referendums and all of that, sure, it was a change in social consciousness. But the way it unfolded and evolved, I think the Parti Québécois and what happened was an effect, not a cause. I think the Seaway was the cause. And if you ever are on a boat and you go a little to the west here, just keep going and keep looking down, because the water's clear now. They've cleaned up the water. Keep looking down, and what you will see is foundations and streets and the occasional stop sign that's still there, and one or two churches, because when all that was flooded for the Seaway, one of the church's steeples still poked up through the water, through the flood. It had to be torn down eventually so that things could be navigable. You see, things change all the time. And sometimes we say it's for the better, sometimes we say it's not for the better, but things change. And the Seaway changed Quebec forever, and it changed the Anglican Church in Quebec forever. But it didn't mean there's no more ministry. Okay, how am I going to pull all this together? So I'm starting by saying, I started the sermon by saying, gotta look at my watch, didn't say that. I started the sermon by saying, I met with a former youth group member who was then in her very early 20s, who was pregnant, and it was a whole new thing for her. Abortion was not on her radar. She was going to be a single mom raising a child. I wished, sitting on my boat, that instead of being caught into a structure that sucks the energy sometimes, I wish that I was rich enough to be able to do ministry full time. And then I was looking at the Seaway and how that had changed the environment in which ministry takes place. So how does that all hook up? Well, it hooks up in this way. The potential that I imagined, even though I never put content on it, but imagined, still exists. Still exists. As long as people need relationships, as long as people need each other, there is the need for the ministry that the church has to offer. And as long as there are people of faith, there will be people to offer that ministry. You see, I'm of the opinion, and my theology is such that what is limiting the church is not the gospel, it's not God, nor is it people's lack of interest in spirituality, the gospel, or God. It is our lack of doing what is required and necessary in order to turn potential into reality. And I want to give that a little bit of content too. You know, see, obviously I'm getting you ready for a handover here, right? I'm going to give that a little content too. I'm going to say something now that Artie's recording, as she always does. If any ministers hear this, I expect hate mail. I'm going to tell you something about starting a new ministry, starting a new parish. You know, people, you know what? Starting a new ministry, starting a new parish is easy. It is incredibly easy. And there's several reasons, I think, why we pretend that it's hard. One, sometimes because we're just too lazy to do it. Another time because we don't have the training, and so we fall all over ourselves and fail. And we say it's hard, but it's not. It's just that we're untrained. And another is we don't really believe that people are interested, so that's our shyness, our insecurity, our egos get in the way. Ministry is easy, and starting up a parish is easy. And I got to give you a couple of minutes on this without hopefully boring you too much. We started up, St. Mary's started up the last parish that was started in the Diocese of Montreal, up in Saint Lazare. And it was so easy, it was ridiculous. The Raywoods and the Walters were here at that time. They are finding the commute difficult and just wondered in this area that at that time was the fastest growing area in Canada whether there was a potential for a ministry there. So Steve and Charles spoke to me at one point, and I thought that was a good thing to be talking about. And so I did what I do. I don't do it anymore. I got in my car and I went and spoke to some principals of some schools, and I spoke to the chief of police, and I spoke to some other city people, and actually I went to a couple of dépanneurs, because you want to know what's going on in a community, talk to the guy who runs the local dépanneur. That's how you learn. And one of the principals of the schools that I spoke to, I said to him, instead of telling him what we were going to do, I asked him, if you were thinking of starting a church, how would you do it? And as somebody who's a part of the community, he said, don't do it on Sundays. That's when everybody rides horses around here. He says, do it during the week. And he says, look, one of his problems, he had too many volunteers, too many stay-at-home moms. He was inundated with volunteers. They were tripping all over each other. It was a problem for him. He says, I'll give you a room. Start a Bible study here anytime you want. It was being handed to us on a silver platter. There wasn't anywhere. So you know what I did? I wrote a paper, and I submitted it to the authorities. And that was the kiss of death. That's what happened. And a person with no experience, really, I was going to say little, no experience in ministry was appointed, no training in church planting, no training in congregational development, and he was just basically told that he was in charge, but in charge of what? He wasn't even told what he was in charge of. And it failed. Ultimately, it failed. Not because there's no potential, not because there wasn't anybody interested, but because it was run so poorly. I'm not being very politically correct here as a diocesan minister, but I really want to drill across, I really want to get it across before I'm no longer incumbent in this place. The potential for ministry is there. People need what we have to offer. Whether it's a pregnant girl in her 20s, whether it's a family you run across at a school fair, people need what we have to offer. And you know what? When we offer it intelligently and without cliches, without patronizing, and when they can see that what we have has had some positive effect in our life and some positive effect in the world, they will be interested. They may not be interested in coming here on a Sunday morning in the middle of winter, a 3,600 square foot building that's going to be 52 degrees on a good Sunday. But they'll be interested in what we have to offer. And what we have to offer is relationships. Relationships with each other and relationships with God. And that is mighty appealing. There's just something else that I wanted to refer to. Social justice and outreach. I regret in one sense that social justice has become almost cliche in our church, and outreach. You know, we need words, but sometimes the words can get in the way. I'd like you please to recall two of our events regarding outreach, St. Mary's outreach. One being the musicathon, where we basically did 24 hours of music. People signed up for an hour, et cetera, sponsored. We had a dinner and a concert as well to raise money to change forever the future of a village in Senegal. I don't think all of us even knew what a porcherie looked like back in those days. We do now because we've got the pictures, because it's up and running. We did that. And when you look at who participated in the musicathon, it wasn't only youth group, it wasn't only youth group leaders, it wasn't only church musicians, it was friends, and it was acquaintances. And when you look at who came to the toddler music thing, I don't know what other word to use than the music thing, because that's what it was, a music thing. To give toddlers, like bang on an instrument or sing or whatever, you know, most of the people who were there, is it possible that my memory is right, that it was all of the people there were not members of this church? You know? And when you look at who came to the dinner, it wasn't all members of the church. People were interested in making a difference in the lives of others that they will never ever meet. They were interested in participating in something that was raising money to change a village. And then the other thing, most recent, and so small in what it is, you know, bees. You know, the idea of we have a hive on the roof, people are concerned because the bees are dying and nobody knows why and nobody knows where they're going. And so Bethany somehow, I don't even know how, got connected with this alveola group or whatever they're called. We ended up with a hive on the roof. She started selling shares. She didn't only sell the shares to St. Mary's people, she spoke about it to friends, and I spoke about it to other church people, because that's my network. And so, yes, St. Mary's participated in this, but people from outside of the church did as well. That's how you do it. You do it with relationships. And when you present something that, dare I use what might be elevated language, when you present something that is life-changing, people are interested. I want to conclude this. Well, I don't want to. I'd like to go on forever. But I want to conclude this with something that I've just been exposed to that it kind of takes me aback. One of the things I wonder about is, in terms of altruism, whether there is any such thing as altruism, or whether it's all thinly disguised, or maybe more than thinly disguised, self-interest. When people support these things, yes, they're helping other people, but really makes them feel better about themselves as a person. You know, what's the motive is what it comes down to. I've just been reading from a person from Princeton, the neuroscience of altruism. You know, there's a neuroscience of altruism. Caring for other people changes the way your brain works in a biochemical way. Your brain physiology changes when you care for other people. And you know what? The chemicals that are produced by caring for people, the chemicals that are produced are the same ones that make you feel good. So if you feel good when you do something good, that's a biophysiological response. It's programmed into us. It's part of, in my language, it's part of what it means to be created in the image of God. We are programmed to care for each other and to take care of each other. It's a biological thing, not just cultural. Man, God knew what he was doing. So what's the future of the church? Well, we can sit around and try to manage things as best we can until the last person now turns out the lights and closes and locks the door. And then, sell some of our resources just to keep our other resources going until they close. Or we can look at the potential. We could look at the potential. We could look at the human need. We can look at the pregnant teenagers and those that aren't teenagers. We can look at the sick, the dying, the poor, the hungry, the lonely, the depressed, and the happy, and the ones that are just tooting along quite well, thank you very much. And we can give them a message of hope, and a message of joy, and a message of purpose. It's called the gospel. And no matter what our circumstances, it is our commission to live it and to share it. That's it for today. Let's pray. God, thank you for the opportunities you give us to connect with people. When I look back over my life, I see opportunities that you presented that I just didn't see. I was too caught up being busy or whatever to see the opportunities that were right there. So forgive that. Forgive us the missed opportunities. Lord God, please open our eyes to what you have presented to us already. Open our eyes to the potential of this community of Christians. No matter what that potential is, no matter what its location is, give us a willingness to see your future. We pray for people that we know who are in need. Today I would ask you to pray for my niece Laura, whose husband committed suicide last week. And now she's going through the post-funeral dark time. Pray for her, pray for those around her. Pray for Nick as he continues to struggle with his health issues. Pray for Leanne and her family. Pray for the family of Rolly Greenbank. And for all who are going through a difficult time in one way or another. God, we know you're there, even though we don't feel it all the time. We know you care. We offer you the burdens, but also the joys of our hearts, trusting ourselves and those whom we love to your care. In Jesus' name, amen. And now, as we do every Sunday, may the peace of the Lord be always with you. Stand and sharing the peace. Touch